Welcome back, Burnout teachers. Today's lesson will be about doing teacher interviews as a social justice educator. So today I'm in Taghazout, which is in the south of Morocco, and I came here to teach English. I know social justice education can mean different things for different people, so in this video I will just be talking about my own experience. I've done numerous amounts of teacher interviews, mostly because I couldn't find a school that I really felt comfortable in and I felt like truly embodied the practice of education that I wanted to pursue. So I've come up with some tips and tricks for you all of the types of questions that you can ask when you go to your interview so that you can understand if it's a school that you even want to work in and that is even committed to the type of teaching practice that you're committed to. For me, as a social justice educator, I believe that testing and evaluation is really just an additional way to create competition against kids and to really detract them from truly finding themselves and their own creativity. And I feel like when testing is the primary motive of education, it really doesn't allow a student to truly find their own voice, which I think is really the purpose of learning and education more generally. And so for me, this is something that I would definitely ask in the beginning, and depending on whether they say, yes, we have testing requirements every semester, every couple of months, if they indicate that you may need graphs in your classrooms. I worked in a charter school where we had to keep graphs with each student's test scores and everything. And for me, that now, if I went into an interview, that would kind of be a red flag for me because I don't think that that would be the right space. I find that a lot of the behavior management strategies of a lot of schools really encourage a policing of kids' bodies and really condition them to be familiar with policing from a young age and not having agency over their own bodies. There's a wealth of research done about how the policing of kids' bodies really prepares them for the school to prison pipeline, and it really creates a way that education serves as the basis for students to be funneled kind of into the prison industrial complex. I think there are ways that you can manage behavior that is not in a way that restricts the movement or polices the movement of your students' bodies. The third thing I would ask is about how they support teachers. I think so often in so many schools that I've worked at, there is a lack of concern about the teachers' well-being, and it's just constantly putting more and more pressure on us and putting more administrative tasks on us, like aside from all the teaching tasks that we already have. Ask to have like a time where you can actually go into the classroom and see the teachers and see the students and see how that plays out in real time. Like oftentimes administrators will say, yeah, like we really support our teachers, we just want to make sure they're happy. But then once you start working there, they actually don't do that, and actually you don't feel supported and you don't feel heard as a teacher. We all want to claim that, we want social justice education and a pursuit of education of all students, regardless of their race, their religion, or their gender, or their ability. But I think that, there's a danger because a lot of people say the right things, but then when it comes to actually implementing them, it doesn't actually translate. And that has been the case so many times for me. I would go to interviews and they would say all these amazing things and I'd be so excited to work there. And then when I started working there, none of those things were actually implemented when I started to become a teacher there. It's important that at the end of the day, you are getting paid what you deserve so that you can continue. It's almost like a motivation for you to continue. I feel like people are much more likely to burn out when they aren't getting paid well and they're burnt out and they're getting treated badly. Like then you're like, okay, I have nothing to lose, I can just leave. And of course, like money is not everything, but I do think being financially secure and feeling like the school is really investing in you and they know your worth and you feel valued, that really changes your mindset towards teaching and towards being invested in that school environment and invested in your students. So I think just being upfront about how much you require so that on those days where it does get difficult and on those days where you feel kind of overwhelmed, because teaching, regardless if you're in a supportive space or not, it is a very exhausting and time-consuming process because you're committing yourself to really, really understanding what a whole classroom of children need. Another thing I definitely would ask about is classroom observations. I think a lot of the time in certain educational spaces where I've been, these observations and walkthroughs have been very invasive and almost as if they're trying to accuse teachers of not really doing what they're supposed to be doing or fulfilling their roles. And so I'd really ask like what their approach is to observations. I mean, I think observations are necessary sometimes, but it does disrupt the dynamic in the classroom when another person is there. It changes the energy, it changes how the kids are acting or reacting to certain things. And so I would really ask about that too, because that can be a great indicator of whether there is true support for teachers and respect for the teacher's classroom and environment and the work that they're putting into to maintaining that space in a certain way. Take note of how they respond or react to the way that you're answering the questions. So naturally, I mean, at least in my experience, when, in teacher interviews, when whoever's interviewing me is asking me the questions, I'll be very upfront. Like, it's very apparent of what my philosophy on teaching is. So, a question that gets asked a lot is like, what is your teaching philosophy? And so I'll go into talking about student-driven learning, how I feel that each student learns in a very different way, how I believe that the music and the arts is an essential part of learning, how I don't really believe that, classrooms can really function in this very, in this polarized way where the teacher's the authority figure and the kids are just sitting there listening, but it's really an interactive and community-oriented space. And, also talking about teaching kids how to be critical thinkers and question what they're being taught, and not to just blindly listen either to what the information that the teacher is providing, and to have an analytical framework by which to ask questions and interrogate what we're learning as an integral part of the learning process. For example, if I were asked that question and I responded that way, I always try to see how the people are responding to what I'm saying. And I think most of the time when I was in teacher interviews, people would respond pretty well, pretty positively. I would say the minority responded, I felt like there was a little bit of a weird vibe, but really pay attention to how they're responding to the way you're answering the questions. And I would just say also, in terms of how you answer questions, be transparent. Don't try to fulfill this ideal of what type of teacher you think the school wants. Rather, you should be finding the best school that works for you. So be very transparent about it, and know that if you don't get offered a position in that school, that means that school is not for you, and it's not going to be conducive to the type of educator that you want to be. Take the whole interview process as an important part of just the exploration of different educational spaces and being aware of what exists out there, as opposed to really just needing to get hired and get a position.